However ruined this world has become, however mired in torment and despair, life endures, and broken and discarded, the inhabitants of the lands between yearn for a modicum of sympathy. To no surprise, many creatures that prey on people's weaknesses and sorrows welcome them into the motherly embrace. We all need a mother, do we not? Today I want to present to you the first episode in my series called Oh Mother, where I will talk about different motherly figures in the lands between that attracted a cult following, and the possible real-world inspirations behind them. The topic of this video is Metyr, the Mother of Fingers. We will look at mythological, biological, and cosmic concepts that could have potentially impacted her lore and design. Please don't forget to like this video if you would find it interesting, and consider subscribing to my channel so you won't miss the upcoming episodes. I would like to start with the possible mythological influence for the Mother of Fingers. I know I'm not alone in my instant thoughts about the myth of Dactyls, but in my own research I discovered some details I found interesting and wanted to share with you. In ancient Greek mythology, the Dactyls, or the Fingers, are the children of Annekkipu, in different sources either a nymph or a Titan goddess. When she knew she was about to give birth, she went to the cave on the Mount Ida and knelt in labor pain, digging her fingers into the earth. From where her fingers touched the earth, the Dactyls were born. Some sources say it was from the handprint of 10 fingers, but equally 3 fingers are mentioned. Furthermore, Annekkipu, who was associated with the heat of the fire, was the wife of Hecateres, a god associated with hands. Dactyls later became servants of the ancient Greek goddess Rhea, a titan and the mother of Zeus, also known as Metyr, the mother of gods. They guarded Zeus, who she hid from her husband Cronus, and they were believed to be intercessors or intermediates between goddess and her mortal devotees. In the Roman Empire, Rhea became interpreted as Cybele, Anatolian mother goddess or Ops. These goddesses, along with Rhea's mother Gaia, are often interconnected in the cults of antiquity, but in Rome specifically, they were shaped into the cult of Magna Metyr, the Great Mother, and another god brought by Phrygians to Anatolia that was later connected to Cybele and thus to Magna Metyr was Sabazius. His mysterious cult is still not fully understood by researchers, but what was discovered are these bronze relics of right hands in a Latin gesture of benediction, which means blessing. Well, that was a lot of mythology, but basically Dactyls, or the Fingers, are children of the goddess associated with fire's heat, and the god associated with hands, intermediates between humans and the mother of gods, guardians of her son who would become the king of gods, and associated with another god whose cult's ritual object were the 2 fingers. Could Metyr be inspired by the god of hands, and the fell god whose visage we find on the furnace golems represent the goddess of the heat of the flame? We do know for sure that Metyr was the first star that the Greater Will sent to the lands between. Before Estelle or falling star beasts, before the Elden Beast, it was a part of an ancient era, an archaic world order before the Elden Ring even existed. The concept of the vessel god and the lord that we'll see later in the eras to come may have not existed back then, so Metyr and the fell god are not necessarily parts of the dual deity. Nonetheless, it is a cool idea I wanted to share. Let me know what you think in the comments, and let's move on to biology. Metyr herself is of course a creature of cosmos. We see the entire universe it holds in its fingers. Some people point out you can hear the sounds of the black hole in the second part of this boss fight. But what about the fingers it produces? Some people believe the fingers are mushrooms based on the description of finger mimic. However, when I first looked at the stone whistle and the valley of hardened fingers, my first thought was they kinda look like corals and the coral reef. And the fact that the fight with Metyr takes place seemingly underwater only added to my suspicions. In my research, however, I found an even more interesting possibility: sponges. Before you tell me I'm reaching, please hear me out. First of all, there are hundreds of types of sponges in the deep waters, and not all of them are yellow, but one thing is real. They can look like fingers, they are hollow inside, and they harden when brought on land. Most sponges are hermaphrodites and reproduce sexually, so-called mother species fertilizing their own eggs. They can also reproduce asexually through budding, something that seemed to have happened to Count Ymir. To theorize further, the great void that is associated with the outer world, where creatures like Metyr and Estelle come from, is of course an allegory for space, but there is another void humans cannot fully acknowledge, the abyss that is the ocean. Both these concepts are used in the game to represent something that is unknown. For example, the world of life after death in many ways is portrayed with marine creatures. Battles with many bosses happen on the water surface. The guidance of grace is but a sun reflection on the sea. The lampreys that guard the fingers look like some sort of amphibians, and Glinstone nails, spells imitated by the finger weavers, remind me of ripples left by the pebbles on the water, the echoes of a greater truth. And some kind of truth was possibly found by a person who was once perhaps collecting dew jam and mistakenly picked some finger mimics, only to discover the hallucinations this mushroom evokes. And later, this once prominent Glinstone sorcerer would use the same mushrooms in his blasphemous ritual, the attempt to turn his body into fingers to resonate with the greater will. Generally, I believe the new lore from the DLC allows a fresh point of view on the Glinstone sorcery. I no longer see the primeval current in the same way. In fact, it is tightly connected to the greater will, as the first astrologers who followed the stars were the first people in the lands between to get the guidance from beyond. The guidance of the stars before the guidance of grace even existed. So let's explore the cosmic nature of Metyr and the fingers. A very long time ago, there used to be a galaxy, and in this galaxy dwelled a powerful outer god. It all started with a great rapture in the sky. For some reason, maybe with the attempt to conquer a new territory, this god decided to send an emissary in the lands between. This emissary would talk to the god through the microcosm that represented the faraway galaxy and retell its will to the natives through the fingers it birthed. In fact, the ancient astrologer who witnessed the first rain of stars coming from the faraway galaxy, or the primeval current, became the founder of Glinstone sorcery, the magic that bears the power from the residue of the star rain, the Glinstone. And so the people worshipped the cosmos and looked into the stars for their guidance and knowledge about life. They knew there was other life in the far beyond. They also respected the emissaries of the outer god, decorated them with intricate jewelry. The cathedrals of Manus Mater and Manus Celis were built. Sometimes people were punished by greater will, which sent the destructive falling stars on these lands. But at some point, the emissary of the greater will stopped getting the signal from the microcosm, and the Glinstone sorcerers who reached their peak in the study of the primeval current lost their minds, as the glimpses they took showed them the destruction of that universe, and after that, only the lightless abyss. And from that moment, any sorcerers who pursued the studies of the primeval current ended tragically, so the tradition became forbidden. The Cathedral of Manus Celis became abandoned in favor of the moon worship, and Manus Mater was only inhabited by the old believers. Count Ymir, a former preceptor in Raya Lucaria, abandoned his allegiance to the moon. After all, it was merely the closest of celestial bodies. On his head he wears an image of the abyss, the former symbol of the greater will. Selen, one of the graven mages who, according to the ancient tradition, carved out her heart and replaced it with a glintstone, judges the Royal Academy as well. Her biggest wish is to re-establish the study of the primeval current, so that the fallen children of the stars shall beam with brilliance once again. She asks us when we become Elden Lord to illuminate her and lay bare the secrets of life which course through the Elden Ring. If you remember, the origin of Glinstone sorcery is the study of the stars and the life therein. What could be more desirable to the Graven Witch than possibly the last bit of the Greater Will's consciousness? The greatest rune, safely hidden inside the beast's body, sent on a star to the lands between, moments before the destruction of the faraway galaxy it originated from. But wait, if the Greater Will still exists, why can't Metyr contact it? Just because it abandoned her in favor of its new plan? Then why cannot Ymir get the signal through his staff? Wouldn't he be a great new mother, the true mother? I think there are two answers to this riddle. First, it's because the Greater Will is no longer an outer god. It feels like any outer god in this game yearns for a vessel, and in the archaic era, the Greater Will spoke from the outside, the fingers like antennas receiving the vibrations from the beyond. But after the destruction of its universe, it can no longer be reached where Metyr is searching. If you use something as a vessel, you physically put the object inside. And so the Greater Will found itself within this world, in a physical body of whoever was the vessel god before Queen Marika, whoever Marika stole the rune from. And also, have you noticed that Ymir's set raises arcane and intelligence? In the older days, it was through your studies of the stars where you could reach the Greater Will. But as an inner god of the lands between, the Greater Will relies on the faith of its followers. The figures represent the flock at prayer, their firm belief in the intangible, inspiring even the solitary founder of their religion. What is faith if not an affirmation? Historically, faith has always been a better foundation for control. Count Ymir still treats the Greater Will like the outer god, just like the Mother of Fingers, who is still waiting for a signal from the beyond. Meanwhile, the Elden Beast, what is left from the Greater Will, has been physically present in the lands between for a long time, and it is faith it answers to. Associated with the Greater Will, the Fingers continued to serve the beast as emissaries, spreading the words of faith. Even they abandoned their own mother, along with the resentful Scadutree, hidden in the shadows. Perhaps the very reason Ymir calls them defective. Clearly it's not the god he knew that they speak for. This is my sci-fi-esque retelling of how I perceived this story. The Fingers never represented the era of the Earth Tree. They existed long before Marika or the Elden Ring, and were part of the original cult of the stars and the aliens. I still have a lot of open questions, like why do the Nox girls who serve Count Ymir have a giant fingerprint depicted on their armor? How does it connect the once favorable but later banished Nox to the Greater Will? Could their black moon have been a ritualistic imagery of the Greater Will's lightless abyss? And why do the servant of the Glowmite Queen use a similar symbol? Maybe she once protected the rules of the Greater Will, and Marika's arbitrariness became the reason for the Godskin's haunt. So many questions, but they're better saved for another time. Do not forget that this would be a series about mothers in Elden Ring. I'm excited to share the next part of my lore speculations in the next video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.